The officer's hand took Obie Sealy by the back of the collar and put him against the wing of the truck, and the hard hat went off his head and rolled away across the gravel and stopped under the bottom rail of the fence, and the leather card case came out of his coat and disappeared into the wet grass. He was 58 years old, 6'2", and thin as a fence post, in a gray work coat with the company patch torn off the shoulder, and he did not resist. Behind the chain link, under one sodium light in the middle of a black field, a substation hummed, ached, and it was not humming evenly. Officer Dane Caskey had taken one look at a black man at a substation fence at 20 to 2 in the morning and decided he was there for the copper. What he did not know was that 3 meters away, bolted to the gatepost, there was a laminated protection schematic with a title block on it, and in that title block was this man's surname and his professional engineer's license number. Before we find out who the man in the handcuffs really was, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. Please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's dive back into the story. Obie Sealy went up his first pole at 19, and he will tell you that everything he understands about electricity he learned in the first 11 seconds of his first real fault, hanging off a crossarm in the dark in 1986. He was a line apprentice. That is the bottom of the trade, and in that era, it was also the way in. You climbed, you dug, you carried, and if you were any good, somebody eventually let you touch something. The man who trained him was a crew foreman named Ferris Boyd, who had been on the line since Eisenhower, and who had, by common agreement, the worst temper in the state and the best hands. Boyd had a rule he said so often that it stopped sounding like advice and started sounding like arithmetic. Electricity does not argue with you, Boyd said. It has no opinion, it has no pride, and it cannot be talked around. It just answers immediately to exactly what you actually built. So, do not tell me what you think is in that cabinet. Go and look. Obie spent 14 years on the poles. That is a long time. He has been on a bucket at 3 in the morning in an ice storm with a transformer burning 2 spans down. And he was under a crossarm in 1994 when a switch flashed over 11 feet from his head. And the scar of that runs down his right temple in a thin white fork that people have been asking him about for 31 years. He went inside at 33 into protection and relays, which is the branch of the trade that everybody else finds boring and that he found beautiful, the study of how a network decides, in a fraction of a second, on its own, which piece of itself to cut off in order to save the rest. He got his engineering degree at night. He got his professional engineer's license at 39, and at 51, he was made vice president of engineering for the whole utility. 2 things he kept from all of it, and both matter tonight. The first is the license. A professional engineer's seal is not a job title. It is a personal legal signature, and Obie Sealy's is on the protection schematic of every substation in that district, the drawing that says which relay trips, which breaker, and why. There is a laminated copy of it bolted inside the gate of every yard, because a crew at 4 in the morning should not have to phone anybody to find out how a station is supposed to behave. 91 substations, 91 schematics. His name in every title block. The second is a habit that his chief operating officer had described in a meeting 11 weeks earlier as a governance concern. Obie Sealy still drives out at night, not to check on his crews. He has said that in public, at a conference, with some heat, because people assume it, and it makes him angry. He drives out because a substation is a thing you cannot read on a screen. A screen gives you numbers. A yard gives you a smell and a sound. And a transformer that is starting to fail tells you with both of those about a week before it tells you with anything you can put in a report. He has explained it exactly once to a room of graduate engineers in 11 words. The data is a description. The hum is the thing itself. What got him out of bed at midnight was a line on a report that nobody else had thought was interesting. Transformer T2 at the Ellet Road substation had produced a gas alarm twice in 9 days. That is not, by itself, dramatic. Large power transformers are barrels of oil with copper wound inside them, and the oil is not lubricant. It is insulation and coolant at the same time. When something inside starts to break down, a bad connection, a weakness in the winding insulation, a partial discharge, the oil cooks locally and makes gas, and the gas collects. And there is a device on top of the transformer whose whole purpose is to notice that. It is called a Buchholz relay. It was invented in 1921, and it is the single most respected piece of protection equipment in the electrical trade because it does not measure current or voltage or anything clever. It measures the thing itself. Gas is coming out of your transformer. Something inside is burning. A Buchholz relay has 2 stages. The first is an alarm. Gas has collected, come and look at me. The second is a trip. There is enough gas or enough oil movement that this transformer is about to fail. Disconnect it now, automatically, without asking anybody. T2 had alarmed twice in 9 days and had not been taken out of service. Obie read that line at 11 at night in his kitchen, and then he read the loading data, and then he sat there for a while. Ellet Road T2 is the sole supply to a rural hospital. 29 beds, a 4-bed intensive care unit, and an operating theater that runs a list 3 days a week. He drove out in his own pickup, which is 19 years old, in which he has been told more than once that he should stop bringing to work sites, and he got there at 1:20 in the morning. He walked it the way he has walked yards for 39 years, which is not the way a vice president walks a substation. Vice presidents look at the dashboard. Obie looked at the ground and listened. The padlock on the pedestrian gate was hanging through the hasp, but not clicked shut. The grass under the fence line had not been cut in long enough that it was into the bottom of the mesh, which is how a fence stops being a fence. The light over the relay house was strobing on a dying ballast, and the drain in the oil containment bund under T2 was blocked with leaves, which means that if that transformer ever did let go, 6,000 liters of burning oil had nowhere to go but sideways. None of that was a catastrophe. All of it was the ordinary, quiet evidence of a station on a maintenance list that was 11 months behind. He wrote all 4 in his notebook and kept walking. At the door of the relay house, a very young man in a company jacket was checking a terminal block with a meter, holding the probes properly, one hand behind his back, which about 1 person in 6 does. He straightened up and said, "Evening, sir," to a stranger in a torn patch coat, and he said it like he meant it. "Evening," Obie said. "Quiet one?" "Not really, sir." His jacket said, "E. Mbatha." He was maybe 23. Then, quicker and much quieter, without looking up from the meter, "Sir, if you're out here for T2, stand on the other side of the fence." Obie looked at him. "Just, if you can," he said and smiled, and the smile was completely wrong for the sentence, and a vehicle went past on the road, and the moment closed. He would think about those 13 words for a long time afterward, not because they were dramatic, but because they were what was left of a young man's courage after somebody had spent 11 days sanding it down. He could not say what he knew, so he said the smallest true thing he could get away with to a stranger in case it helped. Obie walked out to T2, and the night changed inside 4 seconds, and it changed through his ears, not his eyes. A healthy power transformer hums. Everybody has heard it. It is a steady, boring, unwavering note, and the reason it is so steady is that it is produced by the core physically expanding and contracting with the alternating current at exactly twice the supply frequency forever, identically. That is the point. It cannot drift. If the note is uneven, the sound is not coming from the core. T2 was not steady. Underneath the hum, there was a second sound, irregular, like grit in a bearing or fat in a pan, coming and going, and it was coming out of the tank. Obie stopped walking about 6 meters short of it and stood absolutely still for 11 seconds with his head slightly turned. And then he did the second thing, which was to breathe in through his nose, hot oil, and under it, thin and sharp and unmistakable, the smell of ozone. He walked round to the side of the tank where the oil level gauge is and put his torch on it. The oil in the sight glass was not the clear amber it should be. It was cloudy, and against the top of the glass there was a collar of fine brown foam. That is gas coming out of solution. That is the transformer telling you, in a way you can photograph, that something inside it is decomposing the oil. Then he took the thermal camera out of his coat pocket, because he carries one the way other men carry a pen, and put it on the tank. The whole body of it read what a loaded transformer reads on a warm night. But high on the side, above the third bushing, there was a patch about the size of a dinner plate, reading 9 degrees hotter than everything around it. 9 degrees. In a sealed tank of oil that is supposed to be one temperature. Obie photographed the sight glass and the foam and the thermal image with the timestamp visible, and then he went to the relay house. The Buchholz cabinet is a small gray steel box on the side of the transformer with 2 terminal pairs in it, one for the alarm circuit and one for the trip circuit. And the trip circuit is the one that matters because it does not need a human being. He opened it with the key on his own ring. Across the trip terminals, neat, deliberate, and bright yellow, somebody had fitted a jumper wire. A jumper across a trip circuit does exactly one thing. It makes the transformer unable to disconnect itself. Obie Sealy stood in a field at 1:30 in the morning, looking at 11 centimeters of yellow wire, and understood that somebody had taken the pin out of the only device in that entire station whose job was to save a hospital. He photographed the jumper in place from 3 angles, with the cabinet label and the terminal numbers legible, and did not touch it. Then he stood back and looked at the transformer that was talking to itself in the dark, and at the sodium light, and at the road, and he took out his phone to call the control room. And that was when a patrol car came off the highway, with its spotlight already up, and lit him against the fence. Officer Dane Caskey was 27, and he had been on that department 3 years, and I want to be accurate about him, because the accurate version is worse than the cartoon. He had never in his life said an ugly word about anybody, and would have been genuinely and loudly offended to be accused of it. He was on nights alone, in a rural sector with a copper theft problem that was real. That district had lost $11,000 of grounding conductor out of 3 substations in 14 months. And there had been a briefing about it with photographs, and Dane Caskey had sat through that briefing 11 days earlier. That is the honest context, and it is why this is not a story about a monster. What Caskey had was a sorting system, and on a rural night shift it runs on fit. In his head, the world came in 2 kinds. People who fitted where they were standing, and people who did not. And a black man, alone, at a substation fence, at 20 to 2 in the morning, in a beat-up 19-year-old pickup with no company markings on it, did not fit any slot he had. He came out of the car with the spotlight on and his torch up. "Hey, step away from the fence. Hands where I can see them." Obie put both hands out from his body at waist height, palms forward, which is a thing he has done before, and said, clearly and slowly, "My name is Obie Sealy, and I'm the Vice President of Engineering for the utility. I'm on site for a transformer alarm." "Turn around and put your hands on the truck." "I will," Obie said, and did it, and kept talking to the vehicle. "Officer, before anything else, there's a transformer 20 meters behind me that's in trouble, and it needs to come off. I need you to call this into the utility control room, and I'll give you the number. You've got a hard hat and a torch and a truck with no markings on it." 3 questions, Obie said, to the door of his own pickup. "And then this is finished in about a minute. Sir, 1, that transformer has alarmed twice for gas in 9 days, and it is still in service. Who authorized it staying in?" Something went across Dane Caskey's face. It was fast, and it was not confusion, because he did not know what any of those words meant, and a man who does not understand a sentence and has already decided the person saying it is a thief hears it as a story being built at him. 2, there is a yellow jumper wire fitted across the trip terminals of the gas relay on that transformer. That wire stops it protecting itself. I have photographed it, and I have not touched it. Sir, stop talking and don't move. 3, Obie's voice did not go up. That transformer is the only supply to the hospital on Ellet Road. 29 beds, 4 of them intensive care. So, my third question is, can you call the utility control room in the next 2 minutes, and I will stand exactly where I am while you do it? That's it. That's all I want. And there is the fork in the road, 4 seconds wide. Caskey could have made the call, that is all. He did not need to understand one word of it. He did not have to trust the man against the truck. He had to dial a number, say a substation name out loud, and let somebody on the other end react. And if it turned out to be nonsense, he would have lost 90 seconds and a phone call. But Caskey had already decided at 40 meters in a spotlight, and every choice after that was just the bill arriving. He had a copper briefing 11 days old in his head, a man at a fence, an unmarked truck, and no backup for 9 miles. And the thing he did next was the thing he had been trained to do, which was to take control of the person first and establish the facts afterwards. That is a technique, and it is taught, and it works fine right up until the person against the truck is the only human being present who knows what is about to happen. So, he did what frightened men do, and here is the part that made it his. "You people are out here every week," he said. He has never denied saying it. It is on the body camera at 1:44 and 11 seconds, and it is 4 words long, and it is the reason there was a federal complaint as well as an internal one. Obie did not answer it. He has been asked many times since what went through his mind, and he has given the same answer every time. "I was thinking about the jumper. Quick thing before we go on. If you have ever been the person who was right and got treated like the problem for being right, do me a favor and hit like and subscribe, because the next few minutes of this are hard, and I want you here for what comes after them." "There's a card case in my left coat pocket," Obie said. "Driver's license and a state professional engineer's card with my license number on it. And there is a laminated drawing bolted to that gate post 3 meters from your left elbow, with the same number in the title block. You do not have to believe me about anything. You can walk 4 steps and read a sign." Caskey did not walk 4 steps and read the sign. "Hands behind your back." And Obie Sealy, who had hung off a cross arm in an ice storm at 22 and had a lightning fork of scar tissue down his temple from a switch that flashed over 11 feet from his face, looked once at the transformer that was grinding under its own hum in the dark, and put his hands behind his back. Because Obie was not the first person at that station to say those sentences. He was just the first one the company could not take off a shift. Elias Mbatha was 23, and he had been a relay technician for 11 months. He had come to that country at 14. His mother worked nights in a care home. He was doing a protection and control certification 2 evenings a week that he was paying for himself. And he had chosen relays out of every branch of that trade because a lecturer had told his class that a relay is the only part of a power system that has to be right when nobody is watching. He was good. Junior technicians are not furniture. They are the people who physically open the cabinets, which means the newest man in a district spends more hours a week looking at terminal blocks than anybody above him. 11 days before all of this, Elias had been sent to Ellet Road to acknowledge the first Buchholz alarm on T2nd. He acknowledged it. Then he did what his certification course had told him to do, which was to look at the relay itself, and there was gas in the chamber, visible, and he wrote it up on the company's own defect system that evening. T2nd Buchholz, stage 1 operated, gas visible in chamber, recommend oil sample and removal from service. Nothing happened. 6 days later, it alarmed again. This time, when he opened the cabinet to acknowledge it, there was a yellow jumper across the stage, 2 trip terminals that had not been there on his first visit. He photographed it. He wrote it up again, and he added a line at the bottom that a state investigator would read out loud twice. Stage 2 trip circuit has been jumpered out. The transformer cannot trip itself. That afternoon, Garrick Ohl, the district operations manager, came down to the depot and found him, and he was extremely pleasant, and he sat on the corner of a bench so the whole thing looked like a chat. "Elias, can I give you some advice? Because you are going to do well here, and I would hate to watch you make an unforced error." Elias said, "Okay. It is 34 degrees this week, and we are at peak. If we take T2 out, we backfeed the whole of that end of the district through a line that will not hold it, and the hospital, the school, and about 4,000 people go dark for however long it takes." He said it kindly, and every word of that was true, which is what made it work. The unit is being watched. There is a plan. What you have done is put 2 documents into a company system saying, in effect, that my office is running a transformer unprotected. That is not an observation. That is an allegation, and this is a small district, and your certification is signed off by me. He let it sit. Nobody is threatening anybody, he said warmly. I am telling you how a file reads. Elias said quietly that a jumper across a trip circuit is not a plan. You looked in a cabinet, Ole said. Let the people whose license is on the drawing worry about the drawing. That sentence became famous later, for reasons nobody in that room could have predicted. 4 days after it, the roster came out and Elias Mbatha had lost 2 shifts. Not fired, not written up. 2 shifts, which for a 23-year-old paying his own course fees is about $300 and the entire message. That is what he would say 14 weeks later to a utility commission investigator with a recorder on the table. And it is the most damning sentence in the whole file. He never actually said he would fail my sign-off. He put my name and my certification in the same conversation and let me do the rest myself. And Garrick Ole had gone through his own version, and it is worth 2 minutes because Ole was not a monster either. He was 49, and he had a district with 1 transformer feeding a hospital and no second supply because the second supply had been in the capital plan since 2018 and had been deferred 4 times by people who had never stood in that field. He had a heat wave, a load record, and a choice between a transformer that might fail and an outage that definitely would. He fitted the jumper himself. He has never denied it. What he said at the hearing was the truest and worst sentence in the transcript. I was not trying to make it safe. I was trying to stop it tripping, and I have known the difference between those 2 things my whole career. That is what an institutional failure actually looks like. It is never one villain in a room. It is 4 or 5 ordinary people, each with exactly one thing to lose, arranged by a system that deferred a second feeder 4 times because nothing had happened yet. So, when Dane Caskey told Obie Sealy to put his hands behind his back, Elias Mbatha was standing 11 meters away in the doorway of the relay house with a meter still in his hand, watching a stranger get handcuffed for saying out loud the sentences he had been quietly punished for, twice in writing. Officer? His voice came out thin, and he pushed it through anyway. Sir, he's right. T2's got gas. It alarmed twice, I wrote it up, and there's a jumper across the... Caskey turned his head and looked at him. Stay in the building, sir. And Elias Mbatha, 23 years old, 11 months in, with a certification he was paying for himself, and a sign-off held by a man who had already taken 2 shifts off him, stepped back into the doorway. Because that is what almost all of us do, and anybody who tells you different has never had a man sit on the corner of a bench and explain their own file to them. He got 1 step. Then he stopped in the light of the door and did not go back inside. Obie saw all of it, over his own shoulder, with his hands going behind his back, and it told him more about his own district than 11 months of reports ever had. People always stop me here and ask it a little angrily, which is fair. Why did he not just say it? He did say it. That is the difference in this one, and it is worth sitting with. He said his name and his job in the first 11 seconds, out loud, standing still, with his hands away from his body. He offered a card. He pointed at a laminated drawing bolted 3 meters from the officer's elbow, with his own license number in the title block. He did not withhold 1 single thing. Saying it did not work. That is the part people find hardest to accept, and it is the part Obie Sealy has been asked about at 4 conferences since, and his answer is always the same and always makes a room go quiet. I have been telling people who I am my whole life. What I have learned is that it is not information they are missing. So the question is really the other one. Why did he stop arguing and turn round? The answer has 3 parts, and he gave all 3 of them at a commission hearing 11 weeks later. The first was the jumper, 11 centimeters of yellow wire in an unlocked cabinet. It takes 1 person 11 seconds to remove it, And once it is gone, there is no evidence that a transformer feeding a hospital was ever running without protection. There is only a technician's report that somebody will describe as a misunderstanding. If he escalated that argument at the fence, the most likely outcome was that he would be released in 20 minutes with an apology, and that by breakfast the cabinet would be clean. What he needed was not to win an argument with a 27-year-old at 1:44 in the morning. What he needed was a second unit, a supervisor, and a body camera standing in that yard in the next 15 minutes, with everything exactly as it was. Handcuffs summon all three automatically. Nothing else does. He has said it in exactly those words. I could not make him listen. I could make his sergeant come, and I could make her come while the wire was still in the box. The second was the young man in the doorway. He did not yet know Elias had written it up twice. He only knew that a 23-year-old had told a stranger to stand on the other side of the fence, and had then taken one step back and stopped. He knew that shape. He had been that shape at 22, telling a foreman that a switch stick was cracked and being told to go and load the truck. And he knew that, if this ended with a title, the lesson for every junior tech in that district would be that telling the truth about a station is safe only when a vice president happens to be standing next to you. That is not a lesson. That is a lottery ticket. And the third part, he has only said once, to Duke Prosky, in a diner at 5 in the morning. And Duke has repeated it exactly twice because he thinks it is the only part that matters. In 39 years in that trade, Obie Sealy had been asked to prove who he was at a worksite 41 times. He knew the number because he had been counting since 1991, and he had never once made a complaint about any of them. And the reason he had never made a complaint was not fear. It was that he had never been able to think of a version of the complaint that would not end with somebody explaining to him, kindly, that it was procedure. He was 58. He was standing in the middle of the answer. He was going to let it finish. The cuffs went on, and they went on tight. One click pass necessary. Out of the small performing competence of a man alone in a field who is not certain he is right. Obie's shoulders are 58 and have 14 years of climbing in them. 40 minutes later, there would be 2 red bands across his wrists, and a photograph of them, taken by a sergeant on the bonnet of a patrol car, would end up in an internal affairs file, and, 9 days later, in a national trade journal that had run a profile of him in 2019 under the headline, The Man Who Draws the Grid. You're being detained, not arrested, Caskey said. I understand, Obie said, and his voice did not change at all. And that is the thing everybody who was there remembers. It did not change. Then he said the only other thing he said, and he said it at the volume he uses in a switch yard, and it is on the camera. Officer, I want it recorded that I have told you. Transformer T2 at Ellett Road has gassed twice in 9 days, that its Buchholz trip circuit has been jumpered out, that it is the sole supply to a hospital with 4 intensive care beds, and that you have declined to call the control room. Time is 1:46. He walked him to the car. He was not dragged. Nobody hit him. It took about a minute, and there were 4 people to see it. A young technician in a doorway, a contractor asleep in a van on the verge who woke up, and 2 drivers who slowed on the highway and then did not stop. And the whole way, 20 meters behind the fence, T2 kept making that sound underneath its hum, the grit in the bearing, the fat in the pan, and Obie Sealy listened to it going into the back of a police car. Elias Mbatha had not gone back inside. He stood in the doorway of the relay house with his heart going like a bird in a box, and he thought about a man on the corner of a bench explaining his file to him, and about 2 shifts, and about a yellow wire, and then he took his phone out of his jacket and turned it sideways and pressed record. His hands shook so badly that the first 4 seconds are unusable. He got the rest. He got the cuffs. He got the hard hat under the fence rail. And then he did the thing that a commission investigator later called the single most valuable act by any individual in the entire matter. He did not follow the officer to the car. He walked the other way, to the side of the transformer, opened the gray steel cabinet, and held the camera steady for 26 seconds on 11 centimeters of yellow wire fitted across 2 terminals, with the printed terminal numbers legible beside it, time-stamped at 1:48 in the morning, with the transformer grinding above his head. That 26 seconds is why anybody was ever charged. As they came past the doorway, Obie turned his head, found him, looked straight into that camera for about a second, and gave him one small nod. Elias said later that he did not know what it meant. He only knew it meant keep going. So, he kept going. Hey, real quick, if you have ever stood there with your phone out, doing the math on whether the truth is worth a certification you are paying for yourself, tell me in the comments, because I would genuinely like to know how that went for you. And if you want to see what happens next, hit like and subscribe, because the next 4 minutes are the reason I wanted to tell you this one. Because at that exact moment, out on the highway, a set of amber beacons came over the rise. Wendell Prosky, who has been called Duke since 1981, and who would not answer to Wendell if you paid him, had been a system dispatcher for 31 years. He was 64, enormous, permanently in a fleece, and he had spoken to Obie Sealy on the phone at 11 minutes past midnight about a transformer. When his engineer had not called back by 1:30, which had never once happened in 9 years, Duke had done a thing that dispatchers are not supposed to do, which is leave the desk. He had handed over to his relief, taken a company truck, and driven 26 minutes out to Ellet Road because a man he trusted had gone quiet. He came over the rise with the amber beacons on, saw a patrol car with its lights turning inside the compound gate, and a tall, thin man being put into the back of it, and he came up that gravel apron at a speed a 64-year-old man in a company pickup should not. Hey! He was out of the truck before it had properly stopped rocking. Get him out of there. Get him out of that car right now. Sir, back away from the vehicle. Do you know who that is? He was not shouting at the young officer. He had turned, and he was pointing at the gatepost with a whole arm. That is Obie Sealy. He is the vice president of engineering for this utility. Son, his license number is on the drawing bolted to that post you park next to. It is 3 meters from your car. Go and read it. Everything in that yard stopped except the transformer, which kept doing what it was doing. The second unit had come up the road 90 seconds behind him because a call goes out automatically when somebody is put in cuffs, which is the entire reason Obie had let it happen. Sergeant Alma Rooney was 51, 24 years in, and she had parked at the gate rather than driving into the compound, and she had walked because 24 years teaches you to arrive slowly and look at the ground on your way in. She had come in past the gatepost, and she had done the one thing nobody else at that station had done all night. She had stopped and read the sign. Then she picked the hard hat up from under the fence rail and found the leather card case in the wet grass with her torch and came over. "Kasky," she said, "come here a second." She did not make a speech. She opened the case and turned it so only he could see and moved her thumb down it. A driver's license. A state professional engineer's card with a photograph and a number on it. Then she walked 11 paces back to the gatepost, put her reading glasses on, and read the title block of the laminated drawing out loud, slowly, the station name, the drawing number, the printed engineer's name, and the license number under it, so that her own body camera would get every syllable. Then she came back and held the card up beside the drawing so both numbers were in shot at once. "Same number," she said. "Get him out of the car." The cuffs came off on the gravel of the Ellet Road substation at 8 minutes past 2 in the morning in front of a dispatcher, a technician, a contractor in a van, and 2 police officers. Obie brought his hands round in front of him and turned them over, and there were 2 red bands across his wrists. Duke Prosky said something not printable and then put a hand on his shoulder and left it there for a second, which for Duke Prosky is an embrace. "Mr. Sealy," Rooney said, "my camera is running and I want this in the file. I am sorry. This was handled wrong from the first minute, and I am going to document it that way." "Thank you, Sergeant." Obie worked his fingers a few times, and then he did not look at her. He looked at Duke. "Duke, get me the control room on your radio now, and put it on the truck speaker so it is recorded. Ellet Road. T2 comes off. Ring the hospital first, not after Yash. Tell them to start their generator and hold it running before we do anything, and tell them why. Then backfeed the district off Miller Creek, and I do not care what the voltage looks like at the far end for the next 2 hours. Duke was already walking. Sergeant, Obie said, I need one more thing, and I need you to say it out loud on your camera, because I am a man who was in the back of a car 90 seconds ago, and nobody here is going to move fast for me. There is a gray steel cabinet on the side of that transformer. Nobody opens it. Nobody removes anything from it. Not me, not the utility, not a crew. It gets photographed by you, and then it gets sealed, and then it gets opened by the commission. Rooney said it out loud for the camera. Then Obie turned round. Officer Dane Caskey was standing very still, with his mouth slightly open. He had aged about 10 years and 3 minutes. And he was already, visibly, assembling a sentence. Sir, Mr. Sealy, I want to say that I had no idea who you— Not yet, Obie said. He was already walking back toward the transformer, and everybody in that yard, including 2 officers and a 64-year-old dispatcher, found themselves walking after him. There is a hospital on the other end of that machine, and it has 4 people in intensive care tonight. We are going to deal with them first. Then we will deal with this. The hospital started its generator at 2:19 in the morning and ran on it for 6 hours, which is the longest it had run since a test in the previous spring. And it ran fine, and 3 separate people have said, since that if it had been asked to start 4 hours later, in an unplanned failure at the same moment as the fault, it might not have. Tyke 2 came off load at 2:31. Then Obie Sealy did the thing that finished it. And he did it standing on gravel with red marks on his wrists, without raising his voice once. He walked everybody to the side of the transformer, not the public. 2 officers, a dispatcher, a technician, a contractor who had woken up in a van and stayed because he could not believe what he was watching, and eventually the district operations manager, who was called out of bed at 2:40 and arrived at 3:10. Everybody stand here and stop talking for a second. They stood in the dark and listened, and 30 seconds is a very long time to stand in silence in a field. You can all hear that, Obie said. That is not a hum. A transformer hum is one note and it never changes, because it is made by steel expanding and contracting at exactly twice the supply frequency forever. If you can hear anything irregular under it, the sound is not coming from the core. It is coming from something happening inside the oil. He put his torch on the sight glass. Now look at this. That should be clear amber. That is cloudy, and that collar of brown foam at the top is gas coming out of solution. That is the oil being broken down by something hot enough to crack it. He handed the thermal camera to the sergeant and told her where to point it, and let her find the 9-degree patch herself, which she has talked about since. Then he stood back and pointed at the small gray cabinet, sealed now with an evidence tag on it. And this is the part I want you to remember, because the transformer is metal, and this is us. He held up 2 fingers about 11 centimeters apart. There is a wire that long inside that box, across 2 terminals. Those terminals are the trip circuit of a gas relay that was invented in 1921. And its entire job is to disconnect this transformer automatically without asking a human being at the moment it decides the machine is failing. It is designed that way on purpose because the people who designed it knew that at 3 a.m. in a heat wave, there will always be somebody with an extremely good reason to keep the load on. He looked at Garrick Ole, who was standing at the edge of the group in a coat over pajamas. You fitted it, Ole said, in front of 5 people and 2 body cameras that he had. You have 1 transformer feeding a hospital and no second supply because the second feeder has been deferred 4 times by people who have never stood in this field, and you had a heat wave and a load record and a choice. Obie let that sit. That is true, and I will say it in writing to the commission, and it is going to make me unpopular in my own company. And it does not make this all right, because a jumper is not a decision to accept a risk. A decision to accept a risk is a document with a name on it. A jumper is a decision to remove the thing that would have told everybody else. Then he turned to Caskey, and this is the part people quote, And you. You did not need to understand one word I said out there. You did not need to know what a Buchholz relay is. You needed to walk 4 steps and read a sign that was bolted to a post beside your own car, or dial one telephone number. Your sergeant did both of those inside 90 seconds when she arrived, and she does not know what a Buchholz relay is either. Kasky said quietly that he was sorry. I know, Obie said, and I am going to tell you the thing that will actually be useful to you, and then I am going to stop. It is not that you were wrong about me. You will be wrong about people your whole career. Everybody is. It is that you had 4 steps and a phone number available, and you did not take them. And the reason you did not take them is that you had already decided. That is the only part of tonight you can do anything about. And then he turned away from him, and that was the last thing he said to him, and it was not about him at all. Mbatha. Elias came out of the doorway with his phone still in his hand and the face of a young man waiting to lose a sign-off. You wrote it up, Obie said. 11 days ago. Gas visible in the chamber. Recommend oil sample and removal from service. That is the correct recommendation. It is what I would have written, and I have been doing this since before you were born. Nobody read them, sir. They are going to be read out loud by a commission investigator, and then by a lawyer, and then by me, in a room in the Capitol with your name on them. He put out a long hand, and the young man took it. And you wrote the second one after you found the jumper, which means at 23 years old, you looked at a thing your manager had done, and you wrote it down anyway. There are people 25 years into this trade who have never once done that. Then he looked at the transformer, dark now, and cooling, and at the sky starting to go gray over the field, and at 6 people standing on gravel. Right, he said. Duke, get me a lab van for an oil sample at first light, and nobody touches that drain valve before it gets here. Sergeant, I would like your seal on that cabinet and your camera on it while it goes on. And somebody find me the hospital's engineer, because in about 4 hours, he is going to want to know why his generator ran all night, and he is going to hear it from me and not from a rumor. The oil sample went to the laboratory at 8 o'clock that morning, and the result came back in 31 hours. Dissolved gas analysis is a strange and beautiful piece of forensic chemistry. The gases dissolved in a transformer's oil tell you not only that something is wrong, but what kind of wrong, because different failures cook the oil at different temperatures, and each temperature produces a different mixture. Overheating gives you one signature. A loose connection gives you another. Acetylene gives you only one thing. Acetylene means an electric arc inside the tank. T2's sample came back with acetylene at a concentration that the laboratory's report describes, in the flat language those reports use, as consistent with active internal arcing. When they untanked the transformer 11 days later, they found a fault in the winding insulation about 2/3 of the way down the middle phase coil, with the copper discolored over a patch the size of a hand. Every engineer who has looked at that photograph has said the same sentence in some form. That machine was going to fail, and when it went, it was going to go all at once. The Utility Commission's investigation ran 14 weeks. Its report is not about copper theft or handcuffs at all. It is 31 pages about a jumper wire, and the sentence people quote is on page 9. The defeat of a protective trip circuit is not a mitigation of risk, but a transfer of risk from the equipment to the public, undertaken without record, notification, or authority. 2 more substations in that district were found with jumpers across protection trip circuits. Neither had ever been recorded anywhere. Both had been fitted in the previous 2 summers. Nobody was hurt by either of them, and Obie Sealy has said more than once that nobody being hurt is not a result, it is a delay. The Commission's order banned the practice outright and required a physical seal with a serial number on every protection trip terminal in the state so that any interference is visible from outside the box in 1 second by anybody without tools. 4 other utilities adopted it voluntarily within a year. It costs about $11 a cabinet. The second feeder to the hospital, the one that had been deferred 4 times since 2018, was funded at the next board meeting. It took 11 minutes. Garrick Ohl resigned before the hearing ended. He is not in utility operations anymore. Obie wrote a letter on his behalf, which about half of his own engineers thought was a mistake, and it said, in part, that a man who was given one transformer, one hospital, a heat wave, and no second feeder has been handed a decision that no individual should be asked to make alone at 3 a.m, and that the decision was made in an office in the Capitol in 2018 by people who will never be named in any report. Officer Dane Caskey was placed on administrative duty pending an internal affairs review, and there was a second federal complaint about 4 words on a body camera at 1:44. He is not a police officer anymore, and that outcome was not driven by the handcuffs. It was driven by the 4 words, and by what the review found when somebody finally read 3 years of his stops, end to end instead of one at a time. Obie's letter to that department did not ask for anybody to be dismissed. It asked one question: what is the written procedure in this agency when a detained person offers identification and identifies a specific hazard to a hospital? And why did that procedure not operate here? That question is now a 4-hour scenario block, and part of it is a photograph of a laminated drawing on a gatepost with a license number in the title block, 3 meters from where a patrol car parked. Elias Mbatha is a protection engineer. The utility paid for the rest of his certification and then for his degree, and he works in the district office he used to drive out from. The first thing he does at any station, in front of anybody, is open the protection cabinet and photograph the terminals before he touches a single thing, which slows everybody down and which nobody is ever going to stop him doing. His 2 defect reports, printed out, are pinned above the bench in the relay workshop. Somebody put them there as a joke. Nobody has taken them down. And there was one more thing, and Obie did it himself in the autumn. A month before all of this, Officer Caskey had moved an elderly black woman off the verge near that same substation at 10 at night, where she had been sitting in a broken-down car waiting for a tow truck, and had told her to move along. Her name was Betty Fowler. She was 79, and she used an oxygen concentrator at home that runs on mains power. When Obie found that out, and he found it out 11 weeks later, from a list of that officer's stops and had to sit down, he drove out himself with a crew, put a transfer switch and a small standby generator on her house, and stayed for 2 hours while she told him about her late husband, who had also been a lineman in 1974 for the same company. So here's the honest part, and it is uncomfortable, and I am not going to dress it up. Obie Sealy was saved by 4 coincidences. He happened to be the vice president of engineering. He happened to be carrying his license card. He happened to have a 23-year-old technician, brave enough to press record and clever enough to film the wire instead of the arrest. And a 64-year-old dispatcher happened to be worried enough about an unanswered phone call to leave his desk, which dispatchers are not supposed to do. Take away any one of those 4, and there is no video, no oil sample, no commission order. There is a man detained at a fence, released with an apology nobody wrote down, a cabinet quietly emptied of 11 centimeters of yellow wire before breakfast, and a transformer that either held out until October or did not. Most people who get looked at the way Obie got looked at that night do not have their license number in a title block on the gate. Nobody drives 26 minutes at 1:30 in the morning because their call went unanswered. They go in the back of the car, and the field goes quiet, and nothing about it is ever written down anywhere at all. And the 2 failures in that field were the same failure. Nobody looked. Ole fitted a wire instead of writing a document. Caskey decided at 40 meters and never walked 4 steps to a sign beside his own car. A trip circuit that had been designed in 1921 specifically so that it would not need a human being's permission was overruled by a human being anyway. Every one of them read a label instead, because a label is faster, and it is free, and it feels exactly like knowing. Ferris Boyd told me at 19 that electricity does not argue with you. It has no opinion and no pride, and it cannot be talked around. It just answers immediately to exactly what you actually built. I have had 39 years to think about that, and here is where I have got to. That is why I love it, and that is why it is not like us. People can be talked around. People can be given a heat wave and a load record and a manager on the corner of a bench. And they will find a way to build something other than what they know is right. And the machine will go on politely humming for weeks while they do it. The only defense anybody has ever invented against that is a device that does not need our permission, and a person willing to write down what they saw. That night at Ellet Road, somebody had disconnected the first one. The second one was 23 years old and standing in a doorway with a phone. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever been the one who saw it first and got told to stay in the building? Have you ever been Elias, standing in a doorway with your phone, doing the math on a certification you are paying for yourself? And be honest with yourself for a second. Because I am being honest with myself. Have you ever been the one behind the spotlight who decided at 40 meters and never walked the 4 steps? Tell me in the comments. I read them, and this one I really do want to hear. If this story meant something to you, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because this is what I do here every week. Ordinary people, written off in a few seconds, and what happens when somebody finally looks. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next one.